Farming feeds the world. It's a multi-trillion rand industry that underpins human existence itself. But underneath it lies a quasi-energy revolution that either nobody is talking about or everybody is. Biofuels. Global commitments to cut fossil fuel use have pushed biofuels forward as a possible alternative, farming our own fuel. And yet, across the world, skepticism about renewable energy, biofuels especially, runs deep. Right in the middle of an energy transition that's supposed to end our dependence on fossil fuels. Is that dependence even a bad thing? Is it realistic to write off fossil fuels? Not just yet, but ever. Will growing our own diesel or petrol actually be better for the planet? Will nature even allow it? For agriculture and the fuel industry, biofuels represent a genuine opportunity to grow the cereal and oilseed market. From a production standpoint, it can be feasible. As a widespread replacement for fossil fuels, it isn't. Not yet. And maybe not ever. The hardest constraint isn't economic or political. It's nature itself. Photosynthesis. It turns out is remarkably inefficient. So, should renewable energy even be on the table for a developing economy like South Africa? One that still needs energy-dense sources like crude oil to industrialize and meet its own demand? South Africa hopes to follow the lead of its fellow BRICS partner, Brazil, which already draws 47% of its light vehicle fuel and 15% of its heavy transport diesel from biofuels. Rising energy costs, tightening environmental regulations, and limited fuel reserves have all made biofuels attractive to the advocates, especially as South Africa's fuel prices keep climbing, a sharp reminder of how exposed the country is to global geopolitics. Biofuels are renewable fuels made from biological materials, used as alternatives to conventional petrol, diesel, and aviation fuel. The push towards them could be read a few ways: an adaptive strategy to buffer against global shocks, an energy transition ambition, or simply a market for crops, animal manure, and agricultural waste. The feedstock depends on what processors need. Sugar and starch-rich crops are fermented into ethanol. Oilseeds like sunflower are pressed into biodiesel. And more advanced technologies can convert agricultural biomass through biological, chemical, or thermal processes into liquid or gaseous fuel. South Africa gazetted its biofuels regulations in 2025, building on the regulatory framework put in place in 2020, which in itself followed the mandatory blending regulations first introduced back in 2012. Of the 6 crops typically processed into biofuels, here, sorghum and sugarcane have emerged as the most viable for bioethanol production. Processing has come a long way over the last decades. Innovations like using enzymes to boost ethanol yields from sorghum have cut the energy required and made economics of bioethanol projects genuinely worth considering. Economic concerns still linger though. Crop prices tend to track the global oil price, albeit with a lag. But that creates a real problem for the biofuels value chain. Profitability is highly sensitive to swings in both crude oil and agricultural commodity prices. High oil prices paired with low grain prices favor biofuel production. But if oil prices drop just as poor harvest pushes grain prices up, biofuel profitability takes a hit, and the whole value chain feels it. That volatility makes investors cautious. Nobody is going to build a biofuel plant simply because fuel prices happen to be high right now. They need confidence that what they produce can be sold at a predictable price for years to come. Regulations add another layer of difficulty. Because biofuels and conventional fuels are taxed differently, different excise duties, fuel levies, and rebates, government requires strict accounting and monitoring to track which fuel is which. If the same storage tank were used interchangeably for both, regulators will struggle to verify what was stored and when. So instead of switching tank use as market demand shifts, processors have to set aside tanks exclusively for biofuel blending, giving up the flexibility to use that storage for anything else. Biofuels can look like a real opportunity in years of high oil prices and strong harvests, like the 2025-26 among them. But investors remain wary, caught in between sensitivity of crude oil and commodity markets, the need for long-term certainty, and the costs of building large-scale processing facilities while navigating regulations that limit how flexibility they can operate. Sorghum, notably, remains the only stable crop that still is subject to the 15% VAT value-added tax. Biofuels come in generations. First-generation biofuels are grown from food crops, sorghum, sugar, oilseeds like soybean, sunflower, and canola. And second-generation biofuels use non-food biomass, such as energy crops or crop residue, though that comes with its own trade-offs. Pulling the residue off the field depletes soil organic matter, while the third-generation biofuels are produced from algae. But the bigger challenge is always nature itself. Every year seems to bring a new claim of disruptive breakthroughs. Cheap biofuel at mass scale, new biofuel-powered tractor like John Deere 8R E98 ethanol prototype, or cellulosic ethanol from designer enzyme. These are real achievements, but they arrive after decades of gradual development, and none of them can get around one fact: photosynthesis. Photosynthetic efficiency is under 5%. That's remarkably inefficient. Part of why sorghum and sugarcane work is that they're C4 species. But even so, photosynthesis remains the single greatest constraint on biofuels, with land availability close behind. We can push yields higher and higher by intensifying existing cropland, which helps limit further land expansion and biodiversity loss. But once those gains are exhausted, nothing short of a genuine revolution in cultivation will move the needle further. Most of the recent gains in biofuel viability actually come from somewhere more modest: better farming practices and better processing methods for converting biomass into fuel. That's far less of a dramatic story than the one investors and inventors like to tell, much like the hype that surrounds self-fertilizing crops. Photosynthesis has carried humanity this far. Whether it can power our high-powered engines is another question entirely, a humbling limit on our ingenuity, but also a testament of how far we keep pushing beyond what nature first gave us.